I should have walked away when the elevator started moving on its own. The panel showed negative floors. The sound came from inside the walls, like something alive trying to remember how to breathe. The lights turned on before I got there, always a second early, like the building knew where I was going to be. At first, I thought it was an electrical problem. Now I understand it was paying attention to me. In the basement, I found a room that didn't exist on the building's plans. There was a screen on. On the screen, there was an image of a person who looked just like me. Same uniform, same face. Only the smile was different. The image said my name using a voice just like mine. It said the shift had started. I don't work there anymore. But the building still keeps me on shift like I work there day after day. Sometimes I try to remember the exact moment when it all started. I think it was that first night when things really started to go wrong. I arrived at Lakeview Corporate Tower on a Tuesday night when the wind coming off the lake felt like it was cutting through my coat. Cleveland isn't pretty during the day and is even worse at night. The storefronts around were dark, old signs, blacked-out windows. In the middle of it, the 20-story building stood with dark glass and concrete, a square block that looked stuck in the wrong decade. The metal plates next to the door said 1976. It wasn't old enough to be classic, nor new enough to look modern, just a tired building. I stood on the sidewalk for a few seconds, holding my coffee bottle, and wondered how long I was going to last in that job. I thought about the late rent and stopped thinking. I swiped the temporary badge at the reader. The turnstile beeped and the automatic doors opened. The exact moment I stepped into the lobby, one of the fluorescent lights on the ceiling flickered. Just that one, right above me. The rest stayed steady, casting cold white light on the scratched marble floor. I stopped and looked up. The light was still trembling slightly, making a buzz louder than the others. I took 2 steps forward. It flickered again, a quick flash. The whole lobby stayed the same. Nothing else changed. I chalked it up to a loose wire, old building, coincidence. It was either that or accept that the building had waited for me to come in before reacting. To the left was the security desk near the elevators. A guy in a uniform just like mine was messing with his phone. When he saw me, he quickly put it away and tried to stand up straighter. "You're Mercer, right?" he said. "Night shift." "Evan," I replied. "First day." He shook my hand with a damp palm. "Howard." "I'm out at 10:30. After that, it's all you." He pulled out a plastic box, grabbed a new badge, and handed it to me. My name and photo were there. Right below, on a small display, it read, "Employee for 0 days. So far, so good." In the bottom corner, in smaller font, there was another line. "Last access, 10:04, 9:03 p.m. I checked the watch on my wrist. The 10th. I had never set foot in there before. Even so, the system showed I had entered 6 days earlier, almost at the same time. I turned the badge over, looking for a scratched-off name, any sign that it had been used. "It always recycles cards," Howard said, before I even asked. "They probably forgot to erase the old access." He spoke quickly without looking at me. It was a ready-made explanation, perfect for not thinking too much. I accepted it because I didn't have a better one. Howard led me through a metal door behind the desk. The key turned with a long creak. The security room smelled like old coffee. Monitors covered the front wall, all on, each one showing a different part of the building. In the corner, an analog clock showed 10:21 p.m. The detail that caught my eye was a white mug next to the keyboard. Chipped rim, dark coffee halfway full, a thin thread of steam still rising. I stood still at the door. "Cleaning staff uses this as a break room," Howard said. "They're not supposed to, but they do." I had seen the last employee leave when I arrived. The lights on the floors were almost all off. Howard had unlocked the door right in front of me. Even so, someone had left hot coffee in there. I tried to picture the mug on a warming plate, a rushed hand dropping it before locking the door. That was more comfortable than thinking about anything else. Howard started pointing to the monitors. "Entrance here, garage here, main hallways here, elevators here. If something goes wrong, this red panel lights up." I nodded, trying to remember the basics. Make rounds every hour, check doors, write down anything strange in the logbook. We left the room and walked down a side hallway with beige walls. In the middle of the hallway, there was a red digital clock mounted on the wall. I glanced at it just to check the time. The display showed 10:61 p.m. I stopped immediately. All the segments were lit in the right positions. It wasn't a half-burned number. It was a full time that didn't exist. 61 minutes. I kept staring until Howard noticed my silence. "That clock's a joke," he said. "It's been showing the wrong stuff since I started here." While he was talking, the display changed to 10:14 p.m., smoothly, like any old clock. The numbers held steady. I could have asked if he had seen that before, but I swallowed the question. No one wants to hear that the new security guard is arguing with a clock that makes up minutes. The elevator arrived with a ding. We went up a few floors. He showed me emergency doors I wasn't supposed to use, exit alarms that triggered the city's central system, rooms where someone always forgot the lights on. Inside, Lakeview looked like any other office building. Worn-out carpet, light-colored walls, glass dividers, empty desks. What bothered me wasn't what I saw. It was how quickly the sound disappeared. Our footsteps hit the carpet and vanished, like the hallway swallowed the echo. In some parts, I felt a slight pressure in my ear, like I was walking into a room where someone had just turned off a device and the air was still adjusting. On the 10th floor, we walked down a hallway with big windows facing the lake. Outside, there was only black, broken up by a few distant points of light. I could see more of my uniform's reflection than the city. As I walked, I noticed that the ceiling lights seemed to turn on a little before I passed under them. It wasn't a regular motion sensor. It felt like the system knew exactly where I'd be a second later. I stopped suddenly. The next light stayed on. I took 2 steps back. None of them turned off. I took 2 steps forward. The next one lit up an instant before my sneaker touched the carpet. Howard didn't notice anything. He was talking about a leak that happened on the 12th floor. I could have turned it into a joke, said the building seemed to read movements. Instead, I kept it to myself. It was safer to think I was just too tired, that I was paying too much attention to details no one else notices. After a few minutes, we returned to the security room. Howard wrote the time in the logbook, pushed the notebook toward me, and asked me to sign. I wrote Evan Mercer under a column of unfamiliar names. "If anything serious happens, call the number taped to the main monitor," he said. "The rest is just keep an eye on the screens and don't fall asleep." He left and the metal door shut with a dry click. The sound stayed trapped in there with me. I sat down in the swivel chair, surrounded by monitors showing empty hallways, stopped elevators, and an almost deserted garage. The clock ticked steadily. The coffee mug was still letting off steam, weaker now, but still there, like time in that place moved a little slower. I opened the logbook to the page for that night and wrote, 10:30 p.m. Shift started. Everything normal. When I finished the period, I felt something strange. Clean, almost mathematical. As if somewhere in the code of that building, another line had just been filled in with the same information about me. The first shift went by almost entirely without anything out of the ordinary. I did my rounds, wrote down the times, drank coffee, and tried to get used to the silence that seemed to never end. It was a big building, but sound disappeared easily. When I reached the lobby for the 3rd time, the hallway clock showed 1:08 a.m. Time was passing too slowly. I opened the main monitor to check the cameras again. The 10th floor hallway appeared twice on different cameras. I thought one of them was broken, but I noticed they weren't showing the same moment. In the image on the left, an office chair was still knocked over. In the one on the right, it was already upright. The difference was a few seconds, but the feeds were live. I looked back at the digital clock on the wall. 1:09 a.m. On the monitor, the hallway clock's hand was moving faster. I blinked and it jumped ahead 2 minutes at once. I laughed, trying to find it funny. Maybe the system was lagging, or the camera software had bugged out. Even so, I started feeling something on the back of my neck, a strange itch. The feeling that the building was looking back. I decided to go to the 10th floor to check. The elevator took longer than it should have. The lights flickered on the way up, and for a second the panel showed all the floors lit at the same time. When the doors opened, the hallway was empty. The air there was colder, like the AC was only on that floor. I went to the chair from the camera feed. It was on the floor, like in the first image. I lifted it. I looked at the wall clock. 1:14 a.m. Time seemed normal. On the way back, I heard footsteps behind me. I walked faster and stopped at the end of the hallway expecting to see someone. No sound. I took 2 steps. The footsteps came back, identical, synchronized with mine. When I stopped, they stopped. I waited, trying to hear the air conditioner. Only silence. Anyone there? I asked. Nothing. Just a small crack coming from the wall, like something had moved inside it. I rubbed my face and thought I must have been getting paranoid. Loneliness does that. I went back to the security room. The cameras were still showing the hallway, except now the chair was on the floor again. I had just left it upright. I reviewed the recording and saw my own body passing by, but the image flickered. In one frame, I was turning left. In the next, my head was turned the other way. The radio on the desk crackled. I had almost forgotten it was on. Central Security, do you copy? I grabbed the mic. Lakeview Tower, this is Mercer. Silence. The static grew louder, and between the noise, a voice repeated quietly. Mercer. It sounded like my own voice, delayed by seconds, saying the same thing. The static returned. I turned off the radio and looked around. Everything was the same. The monitors glowed with still images. One of them showed the garage. In the right corner, a shadow moved quickly, like a reflection crossing the glass. I kept watching until the shadow disappeared. I grabbed the logbook to distract my mind. The old entries dated back months. All the names were different. On some pages, the times for the rounds were written twice with different minutes, like someone had repeated the same line, changing one detail. The letters didn't match, but the handwriting looked similar. The next page was stained with coffee. Between the stains, I could read, "If the sound is wrong, the building is awake." I didn't understand. I closed the book and took a deep breath. The air got cold again, and this time it didn't seem to come from any vent. The temperature dropped so fast I could see my breath. I went to the thermostat. The display showed 72 degrees, normal. I touched the wall next to it. It was freezing. The garage monitor beeped. The camera restarted on its own, showing the vehicle entrance. In the bottom corner, the date flashed 2015. I blinked, and it went back to 2025. I hadn't touched anything. I picked up the phone to call Central, but the screen lit up before I could dial. "Line in use," it said. I put the receiver to my ear. Silence, then static. The same voice came back, clearer this time. "Evan." I hung up hard, and the phone fell off the desk. The computer screen blinked and reopened the login file by itself. The system showed, user, Evan Mercer. Previous access, 1:14 a.m. The same time I had seen on the hallway clock. I hit ESC several times until everything closed. I stood in front of the monitors watching each floor. Floors 8, 9, and 10 had the same hallway, the same lights, but in different positions. The 9th floor camera showed a shadow crossing the wall, and the 8th showed the same movement 2 seconds later. It was like seeing the same event in sequence, just repeated. I wrote down the times in the notebook. 1:37 a.m., 1:39 a.m., 1:41 a.m. The pattern was consistent. Every 2 minutes, something moved from one floor to another. A shadow, a light glitch, I don't know. I rewound the footage and counted. 6 appearances, identical intervals. The building wasn't just old, it worked like a broken clock still trying to keep time. Everything that happened had rhythm. The noise came back, this time from the central speakers. It wasn't a voice anymore. It was knocking 3 at a time, followed by silence. 1:42, 3 knocks. 1:45, 3 more. Timed. I turned off the sound and sat down. The chair's leather was cold. The feeling that I was the only one awake in the world suffocated me for a moment. The lobby lights were flickering on the screens. I looked at the digital clock on the wall. 1:50 a.m. I looked at the monitors again. In the corner of camera 3, a reflection moved, identical to mine. I took a step to the side. The reflection did too, with a slight delay. I stared for long seconds, trying to figure out if it was a camera delay or a transmission glitch. The figure stayed still in the same spot. leaning forward as if watching. The chair creaked when I stood up. On the monitor, the figure moved again, but the delay was shorter. A second before I moved, it had already started the motion. The light in the room flickered, and for an instant all the monitors showed the same hallway, the same image, copied. In the middle of the hallway, the fallen chair. The wall clock read 1:14 a.m. I turned off the monitors one by one, but the main screen didn't go dark. The system restarted on its own and displayed a message. Security cycle initiated, please wait. The sound of footsteps came back, from the real hallway outside. Slow, rhythmic steps, matching the system's beats. Each step aligned with the change on the digital clock. I grabbed the flashlight but didn't turn it on. I stayed seated, listening to the sound fade away until it disappeared completely. I wrote in the logbook, 1:57 a.m., repeated patterns. The building seems to be learning. I woke up to the sound of static on the radio. I hadn't fallen asleep, but I also didn't remember closing my eyes. The wall clock showed 3:08. The logbook was open, and in the middle of the page there was a line written in blue ink. Round completed at 2:45. The handwriting was mine, but I didn't remember writing it. I ran a hand over my forehead, trying to figure out how much time had passed. The coffee next to me was cold, the same one I had made after the voices. I picked up the pencil and crossed out the line, just to make it clear I didn't trust it. But when I looked again, the mark had changed position. It looked like a new stroke, made by someone else's hand. The silence was so heavy I could hear the buzz of electricity in the lights. The monitor screens showed the same hallway on different floors. The digital clock in the lobby was changing time in strange intervals. 3:09, 3:10, 3:09, 3:12. I tried to keep up, but it was like watching a broken metronome. I picked up the old incident logbook. It was in a locked drawer I had found by accident, full of old papers. The book was thick, black cover, the name Lakeview Security Logbook, stamped in letters almost faded. When I opened it, the smell of mold rose like dust. The first pages were normal. Round reports, light failures, maintenance. But the handwriting started to change halfway through. It looked like it was written by different people, but always with the same pattern of short, direct, almost identical phrases. Temperature dropped again at 2:37. Sound in the walls repeated 3 times. Reflection didn't match. I flipped through a few more pages and realized something was wrong. The letters, which had been in black ink before, now looked deeper, like they had been pressed into the paper, not written. I ran my finger over one of them and felt the indentation. The paper was cold. I went back to the previous page. The letters had changed. What had said, reflection didn't match, now said, reflection responded. I shut the book quickly, trying to laugh at myself. It was impossible. The room felt smaller. The sound of the clock had stopped, but the hands were still moving. Each tick was a second without sound. I stood up and went into the hallway to stretch my legs. The air was still, the smell of cleaning product mixed with dust. In the glass door, I saw my reflection, but it blinked a second after I did. I took a step back. The reflection did the same, with the same delay. I touched the glass with my fingertips. The reflection touched too, but something wasn't lined up. The reflection of my face wasn't looking straight at me. It was looking at a spot behind my shoulder. I turned quickly. The hallway was empty. When I looked back, the reflection was already normal again, synced up. I went back into the room and sat down. The book was still on the desk. I decided to open it one more time. The pages were different, not just the words. Their order too. The most recent entries were at the beginning. The first sentence now read, "Night shift, Evan Mercer, active." My name was there, written in firm handwriting. Underneath it, observation, cognitive pattern developing. I closed the book again and felt the air grow heavier. A hum started low and grew until it filled the room. It came from the walls, the lights, the floor. It was a vibration, not just a sound. The computer restarted on its own. On the black screen, a white line of text appeared. File Mercer 01 synchronized. Then the screen blinked and showed the camera feeds. The 10th floor hallway was empty. but the lights were flickering in the same rhythm as the hum. With each flicker, the chair fell and stood back up on its own. The images played on loop. I saw a shadow standing still in the back, unmoving. When I tried to zoom in, the system froze. I looked at the digital clock on the wall. 3:33. I blinked. 3:31. Blinked again. 3:35. It flickered, went back, jumped forward. The hands on the analog clock did the same, spinning in small circles like time had lost its meaning. I tried to write something in the logbook, but the pen failed. I picked up the pencil. The tip snapped on the first stroke. I rubbed my finger over the paper. The indent was still there, but the graphite faded seconds later. The idea that the building was reacting to my actions started to feel real, as if it were adjusting the glitches, correcting me. Everything I did was followed by a subtle response. I stared at the reflection of the computer screen in the window. The light blinked once. The reflection of my face blinked twice. The cameras changed on their own. They were showing the elevators now. In one of them, the door opened slowly. Nothing came out. Even so, the hallway lights turned on before the movement, like they were expecting something. I grabbed the old book and flipped to the end. The last pages were blank except for a thin line running down the middle, like someone had lightly dragged a pencil across. When I turned to the next page, it was no longer blank. Final observation: the subject is aware. The air turned cold again. The lights started pulsing in a steady rhythm. The humming stopped. Then everything went silent. I opened the current logbook and wrote the only thing I could think of. 3:46 a.m. The building knows that I know. The following dawn began just like the others, but the building seemed more attentive. The lights turned on the instant I took a deep breath, as if they sensed the air changing. I no longer tried to find electrical faults. I simply accepted that everything there reacted to me. Starting at 3 in the morning, I began to record every event. The noises, the drops in temperature, the cycles. Over time, I realized everything followed a pattern. The first sound always came 24 minutes after the previous one. The second, 48. The third, 72. Then the cycle restarted. It was too precise to be coincidence. The knocks on the walls followed the same rhythm, 3 at a time, spaced out almost like a heartbeat. I wrote down the times and compared them. Each cycle repeated the previous one. I looked at the old incident logbook and noticed that the previous guards had recorded the same times. 2:24, 3:12, 4U. The pattern never changed. It looked like a code. I went to the main hallway. The white light made the floor shine. I touched the wall and felt a faint, constant vibration. It was like touching a motor that never shut off. I felt the cold pass through my fingers and the sound spread inside my head as if the building had a pulse. The cameras showed the shadows in groups of 3. On the 10th floor, 1 shadow crossed the hallway. On the 9th, 2. On the 8th, 3. Then everything reset and started again. The same path, the same sequence. At first I thought they were light glitches, but I realized the system never made mistakes. The time between each sequence was always the same. Exactly 60 seconds. The computer froze when I tried to save the recordings. The screen went black and showed a blinking white line. Words typed themselves. Cycle complete. Next observation in progress. I tried to type anything, but the keys didn't respond. The text erased itself and the system returned to the cameras. I started to realize the building didn't want to scare me. It wanted to teach me. Everything that happened followed an invisible rule, like a living math. Every sound, every light, every shadow formed part of a whole. I grabbed a sheet of paper and began drawing the building's map. Each floor had 12 main hallways. Each hallway had 4 doors. 4 times 12, 48. The same number that appeared in the cycles. My stomach tightened. The entire building was organized according to an exact sequence. It wasn't human design. It was structure with purpose. I went back to the security room and opened the logbook again. Now the pages were full of symbols. Triangles, crossed lines, repeating 3 dots and a dash. I recognized the same patterns I had just written down. Beneath one of the symbols, there was a sentence. Those who remain are incorporated. I paused for a moment. The word incorporated felt out of place. It didn't sound like something a guard would write. The digital clock in the lobby turned to 4:24. The air got heavy. The camera lights started to flicker. On the screens, the shadows moved together, aligned, all in the same direction. They were moving up the floors in sequence like something was climbing from the inside out. I went to the elevator. The doors opened before I pressed the button. Inside, the panel lit up the numbers 3, 6, and 9. I didn't touch anything. The elevator started going up on its own. It felt like being transported inside a body. The interior lights flickered in the same rhythm as the knocking in the walls. When the doors opened on the 12th floor, the air was cold and still. The hallway windows reflected the city, but the lights outside were blinking in the same pattern as the building's lamps. I stared and understood. The cycle wasn't trapped within the walls. It extended. It spread. I ran back to the room and turned on the computer. I opened the surveillance system and selected all the floors. The building map lit up with white dots, forming a shape that looked like a spiral. It pulsed in the same rhythm as the knocking. The vibration grew stronger. The walls trembled lightly. The sound was steady, like breathing. The building was alive, breathing through its structure. I looked at the logbook again. The letters started changing in front of me. A new line appeared. Cycle 47 complete. Observer synchronized. I stared at the words forming by themselves. When I touched the paper, I felt warmth. The entire building pulsed around me, the wires vibrating, the lights blinking in sync. I thought about the other guards. No name repeated in the records. All of them had disappeared after a few weeks. The sentence about incorporation made sense. They hadn't left. They were part of the pattern. The hum spread through the speakers. It was the sound of layered voices, too many to tell apart. But I understood one word: continuity. The vibration stopped suddenly. The lights held steady. The shadows vanished. The building was quiet. I opened the book and wrote with a shaking hand, "The building is an organism. Everything in it follows a rule. It's learning from me." The next few hours passed without me noticing. I wrote everything down. Every sound variation, every flicker of light. The cycle was faster now. The building wasn't just watching me anymore. It seemed to be responding. When I stood up, the air shifted. When I spoke, the noises in the walls grew louder. At 4:28, the phone rang. The sound was so loud it made me drop the pencil. I picked up the receiver slowly. "No number on the screen," I answered. "Lakeview Security, this is Evan Mercer." Silence. Then a short breath. "This is Evan Mercer," the voice replied. It was my voice. Same tone, same rhythm. "Who is this?" I asked. The voice repeated, now closer. "Who is this?" I hung up and let the receiver fall. The line started ringing again. I didn't answer. The sound echoed through the hallway as if every phone in the building was ringing at once. The cameras changed on their own. On the main screen, the 10th floor hallway was empty. Then a figure appeared. Dark uniform, same build as mine. Walking slowly, looking at the windows. It looked like it was doing rounds. I zoomed in. It was me. Same face, same posture, same badge. But there was a delay in the movements. When I breathed, the figure did the same a second later. I pushed the chair back, heart racing. I ran to the actual hallway, but it was empty. The lights were flickering, and the sound of wind slipped through invisible cracks. I went back to the security room. On the monitor, the figure was still there. Now, it was staring directly at the camera. The image flickered. With each flicker, it got closer. On the third flicker, it filled the entire screen. I turned the monitor off. The screen went black. The light in the room blinked for a second, and in the reflection on the dark glass, I saw my own face. It wasn't looking at me. It was turned to the side, as if listening to something I couldn't hear. I felt the air change. A sharp cold cut through the room. I looked at the wall thermometer. 72 degree almost. I blinked. 45 degree hour. Blinked again. 20 on degree hour. The glass on the clock started to freeze. I went to the door. The handle was too cold to grab. I touched the metal with my coat and pushed. The hallway was covered in a thin fog. The lights were flickering in sequence one by one all the way down the corridor. I took a few steps. The floor cracked under my boots, even though it was carpet. The sound was sharp, like breaking ice. The walls vibrated. Every one of my steps was echoed by another, slower, heavier one coming from the end of the hallway. I pressed the elevator button. The doors opened without a sound. Inside, the panel showed all the floors lit up. None of the buttons worked. The elevator started going down on its own. The sensation of descent lasted too long, longer than it should have. The panel read 2, 3, 4, floors that didn't exist. When the doors opened, there was only a narrow hallway, made of raw concrete with cables running along the walls. The light was dim and pulsing. I walked carefully. At the end of the hallway, there was a small, round room with no windows. In the center, an old monitor. On the screen, white lines moved, forming geometric shapes that shifted slowly. Triangles, circles, and squares rearranged themselves, creating something that resembled a face. The image pulsed in sync with my heartbeat. When I took a deep breath, it expanded. When I exhaled, it shrank. I saw the pattern. It wasn't a creature. It was a structure trying to copy. The screen flickered and started showing images of the building. Hallways, rooms, elevators. In each one, human-shaped shadows moved in the same rhythm, all wearing the same uniform as mine. I stepped back. The shadows froze. A line of text appeared on the screen. Replication process initiated. The lights went out. The sound of the building grew louder. It was the same heartbeat I'd heard in the walls, now rising from the floor, through the pipes, through the wires, through the beams. The monitor turned back on. It showed my face, but without expression. The eyes blinked on a different rhythm. The lines of the figure adjusted, trying to form something human. I touched the screen. The glass was warm, like living skin. The lines trembled. A second later, a voice came from the speaker, the same one I had heard on the phone. Evan Mercer, Level 0 security. Full cycle initiated. The voice wasn't hostile. It sounded like a system reading out loud, but the way it said my name made me step back. I ran back to the elevator. The lights were flickering and the sound of footsteps followed me. The elevator was waiting, doors open. I pressed the ground floor button, but the panel only showed negative numbers. The floor shook. The lights went out and came back on in the same second. The elevator went up, but I didn't feel any movement. When the doors opened, I saw the security room. Everything was the same, but different. The logbook was in a different position. The coffee mug was full and hot. On the monitor, I was sitting, writing. The screen's reflection showed my hand, but in the video it moved faster, like the system had recorded something earlier. I looked at the real book. The pages were writing themselves. New lines appeared, describing my actions with precision. Evan Mercer observes the system. Evan Mercer tries to understand. Evan Mercer is being copied. The air turned cold again. The sound of knocking came from the walls. 3 times. Pause. 3 times. The building's heartbeat rhythm. The main monitor flickered. The figure on the screen stood up from the chair and walked toward the camera. I didn't move, but it did. Each step was a calculated delay. When it got close enough, the image froze. The screen went white, and then black. The letters returned. Synchronization complete. I felt a pressure inside my head, like someone was pushing my thoughts to the back. The sound of the knocking was inside me now. I understood without a doubt what the building wanted. It wasn't trying to kill me. It was trying to learn. Every action, every fear, every reaction. I was a variable in its system. The cold grew stronger. The lights exploded one by one, in perfect sequence. Everything went silent. I grabbed the book and wrote quickly with a trembling hand. It understands. It learns. It copies. When the clock hit 5 in the morning, the building went completely silent. No lights flickered, no sound. The air was still, heavy, like the entire place was holding its breath. I knew it was the end of the shift. The manual said the guard rotation started at 6, but I couldn't wait. I grabbed my coat, badge, and the book. I didn't look at the monitors. I walked down the hallway slowly, trying not to draw attention from anything. The lights were still on, but the glow felt weaker, more distant. With each step, the cold faded. With each breath, the building seemed to release a little bit of me. The elevator was on the ground floor when I arrived. The doors opened before I pressed the button. I stepped inside. The panel showed only one floor. 0. I pressed it. The sensation of descent was brief. When the doors opened, the lobby looked exactly as it did when I first arrived. Clean reception desk, shining floor, the same flickering light overhead. I passed by the front desk. The coffee mug was still there, steam rising slowly. I ignored it. I walked to the glass doors. They opened with a soft sigh. The air outside was warm and humid. The sky was starting to brighten. I walked to the car parked at the end of the street. The windows were covered in dew. I got in and shut the doors. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn the key. I drove without looking in the rearview mirror. Every stoplight I passed felt farther from the last. At each corner, the weight seemed to lift a little more. I only truly breathed when I saw the lake shrinking in the mirror. At home, I threw the uniform in the trash and took a hot shower for almost an hour. The water ran down and I hoped it would wash away anything that might still be clinging to me. When I closed my eyes, I saw the pattern from the building's screen, the lines moving, trying to form a face. Sleeping was hard. When I finally managed, I dreamed of white hallways and the sound of knocking in the walls. I woke up with my heart racing. The bedroom light flickered once and went back to normal. I tried telling myself it was exhaustion, that it had all been a hallucination, that the building was old and the system faulty. But the part of me that still felt Lakeview's rhythm knew it was a lie. On the second day, I noticed something small. The automatic door at the grocery store opened 1 second before I got there. Always the same interval, exactly 1 second. On the third, the car radio turned on by itself when I stopped at a red light. The frequency read 147, 24, the same number from the cycles I recorded at the building. I started seeing symbols in strange places. On the mailbox of the building where I live, someone had drawn 3 lines and a circle. On the parking gate, the same marks, only carved into the rust. I began walking faster, looking at the ground, avoiding any reflection. Even so, the store windows reacted when I passed by. The lights inside the shops flickered in sequence, one by one, as if they were testing my rhythm. At night, the doorbell rang. I waited, looking through the peephole. No one was there. On the doormat, a white envelope with no sender. Inside, a sheet with the Lakeview Corporate Tower logo and the phrase "New Shift Available." Below it, the date for the next Monday and my full name. I tore the paper and threw it away, but the fear didn't leave. The next day, there was another envelope. Same content, same font. I tried calling the company's old number, but the call wouldn't go through. Only static. After a few seconds, the noise formed quiet words. Logan pending. Access suspended. I tossed the phone on the couch and turned off the router. The house went silent. Even so, I felt the air move behind me, like someone had just walked by. The shadows on the wall looked longer, as if the room were bigger inside than outside. When I took a deep breath, the curtain moved with it, following the rhythm. I tried to ignore it. I started sleeping with the light on. Even so, I woke in the middle of the night with the sensation of being back in the hallways. The sound of the lights, the crack of the walls, the cold slipping into my skin. On the 7th day, I decided to leave. I took the car before sunrise and headed west. The road was empty, the horizon gray. I passed the "Welcome to Indiana" sign and felt a brief relief, as if I had left something behind. But the car radio turned on by itself. The digital screen showed a new notification. Lakeview Security, login approved, 0 days active. I pulled over and turned off the engine. The sound stopped. The screen went dark. I looked at my phone. It was off, but a blue light blinked in the corner. I picked it up. The screen lit up on its own. On the black background, a white sentence. Synchronization complete. I let the phone fall onto the seat and stared at the horizon. The wind hit the trees, repeating a familiar rhythm. 3 times pause, 3 times. The sun rose slowly, but the light didn't bring comfort. I knew Lakeview wasn't a place anymore. It was a system, and I was part of it.